Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and today I want to share with you a 3D printing news story that's starting to make its rounds across the community, but unfortunately, it's not for the best of reasons. This is about a proposed law that, if enacted in the state of New York, will basically make buying a 3D printer a lot more difficult because it would require a background check. So let's go over it. Let's take a look at what's going on in the state of New York. So this is a recently introduced bill, Assembly Bill A8132, and it relates to criminal history background checks for the purchase of 3D dimensional printers capable of creating firearms. So over the past few years, we've been hearing more and more about ghost guns, basically these untraceable guns that are created using 3D printers and then subsequently used to commit crimes. So this is something that is supposed to combat that, but it doesn't really do much good in the way of doing that, in my opinion. So let's take a look at this. Now, this is not an actual law right now. In fact, it's nowhere near close to being a law because according to this timeline, it was introduced and it is currently in committee assembly. After that, it has to go through the Senate committee and then the floor assembly and then the Senate floor assembly. And then it has to pass both the assembly and the Senate and then get delivered to the governor. And then the governor has to sign it. So it has a long way to go. So I wouldn't be getting too excited about that right now. But that's just to let you know what's going on in the process. So let's look at what this bill can entail. So here we go. This is an act to amend the general business law in relation to criminal history background checks for the purchase of three-dimensional printers capable of creating firearms. The people of the state of New York, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. The general business law is amended by adding a new section to read as follows. Sale of certain 3D dimensional printers. 1. Any retailer of a 3D dimensional printer sold in this state, which is capable of printing a firearm or any components of a firearm, is required and authorized to request and receive criminal history information concerning such purchaser from the Division of Criminal Justice Services in accordance with the provisions of Section 845 of the Executive Law. Access to and the use of such information shall be governed by the provisions of such section. The Division of Criminal Justice Services is authorized to submit fingerprints to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for a national criminal history record check. Within 15 business days after receiving a request for criminal history information pursuant to this case, the Commissioner of the Division of Criminal Justice Services shall review such criminal history information and determine whether such purchaser has been convicted anywhere of a felony or a serious offense, or who is not the subject of an outstanding warrant or arrest issued upon the commission of a felony or serious offense which would disqualify such individual from being licensed to carry or possess a firearm under Section 400 of penal law. Such Commissioner shall promptly notify the seller of his or her determination in this regard. No retailer shall sell any three-dimensional printer capable of printing a firearm unless the Division of Criminal Justice Services provides written notification of the determination under this subdivision. For purposes of this section, three-dimensional printer means a computer or computer-driven machine or device capable of producing a three-dimensional object from a digital model. So this is one of those proposed bills that I think on the surface has good intentions, but unfortunately, the person who came up with this, I don't think has a very good understanding of 3D printing and 3D printers and how the whole thing works. It sort of reminds me of like my grandparents and how they would refer to everything that was a video game as a Nintendo, even though We could be playing a freaking PlayStation 5, but to them, everything is a Nintendo. And there's so many different nuances and stuff, and I don't want to go into it to explain it to them. So that's kind of what I think is going on here. They know about ghost guns, they know that they're made with 3D printers, so therefore 3D printers need to be regulated. And no, that's not how it should be at all. Now, let me introduce you to the person who proposed this bill so that we can learn a little bit more about her. So here she is here. This is Jenifer Rajkumar. If I'm not pronouncing her name correctly, my apologies. But, just to learn a little bit more about her, and I do not want anyone dragging this woman through the mud or anything like that. This is just so that we can know about the individuals who propose the laws that people in New York are going to have to abide by if it does in fact become a law. So just learning a little bit more about her, she is a very educated woman. So check this out. And I want to give her flowers because she's done a lot of great things. So she's the first South Asian American woman ever to be elected to state office in New York. She graduated from Stanford Law School and the University of Pennsylvania, and she works to empower disenfranchised, vulnerable, and excluded individuals on national and local levels. And in many ways, this woman is the American dream personified because her parents immigrated to the United States with $30 in a suitcase, raised her in Queens, and she's the first generation of her family to be born in the United States, and look at where she has gotten. So she's helped to make a lot of really good laws, I think, to help protect the normal working class people, regular workers, victims of abuse, and all this stuff. So this assemblywoman is not a villain. I just think that she's just really misinformed about this particular subject. So, for example, if someone wanted to make a gun from a 3D printer, they can do it without walking into a micro center, for example, and buying a 3D printer fully assembled and ready to make some weapons. Chances are, if someone really wanted to get their hands on a ghost gun, and they wanted to print it themselves, but they couldn't because New York stopped them, technically they could go out and buy the components necessary to make a 3D printer in order to complete the job that they're trying to do. So does that mean that you're going to have to regulate hot ends and extruders and gantries and beds and motherboards and all of the stuff that you would need to make a pretty basic 3D printer that can make something like this, something that would be more akin to like an Ender 3 or Ender 3 V2? That's an option that people have, but that's not covered in this proposed bill, which is something that you would definitely have to consider because it's easily circumvented. And while they're busy regulating the printer itself, the printer is useless without the materials to actually do the printing. So does that mean you're going to regulate PLA, ABS, carbon fiber filament, and all the other types of exotic filaments that you can get? Because under this bill, it's just 3D printers. But what about the filament? If you left that out, then that kind of just shows that you don't have a really clear understanding of how the whole thing works, because you can't print anything without the filament. And then what about other ways to obtain a 3D printer that's not just going into the store and subjecting yourself to being fingerprinted and running a background check on you? What about private sales? What about things like Craigslist, Mercari, Facebook Marketplace, just face-to-face sales, anything like that? You can still easily, especially these days, you can easily get a 3D printer just on the open market. So people will be able to not only do that, but they can save a lot of money in the process as well. So that kind of just gets around the whole background check as well, because it's legal to buy and sell 3D printers, unlike guns where you just can't go around as a regular person with no license or anything, in some places and just sell guns all willy-nilly. But it's not like that with 3D printers. You can sell them as easily as you can sell a phone or as easily as you can sell a computer. So that's another really easy workaround that this proposed bill cannot circumvent. And then it also puts 3D printers in a very negative light because by making it so that you can only purchase it after the successful completion of a background check, it effectively pushes away regular people who might have wanted to get into the hobby, but now feel that the machine is potentially dangerous or something that is used so much by criminals that the government has to get involved. So they want to step back from it because they don't want any kind of attention being put on them simply because they wanted to make a few figurines and now the FBI has their fingerprints. You can't put 3D printers and firearms on the same legislative plane because guns serve one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to kill or maim whoever the gun is pointed at. That's the only purpose that a gun serves. That's it. Now, when it comes to 3D printers, it can serve a wide variety of purposes, not just creating guns. You can create toys, you can create functional parts for machines, you can create things that you just use around the house. And then, as far as the educational aspect of it, libraries have 3D printers. Schools have 3D printers, and I think that more schools should have 3D printers, especially public schools, so that kids these days can learn more about how this stuff works since it's not going anywhere. And then also teach them about 3D modeling software so that they can create things themselves on the computer and then take it over to the 3D printer in order to print it. Now, just kind of imagine the type of blowback or concerns that parents might have if 3D printers are something that needs to be regulated and then you need to go through a background check in order to purchase it. Parents who may not know better, they probably wouldn't want their kids to get involved with something that is basically being shown as being just as dangerous as a firearm. Something like that, it really hurts not only the hobby, but also the innovation, their creativity, and the proliferation of 3D printing in general. And if this type of thing were to spread throughout the country, then the country itself, I think, misses out on a huge potential opportunity. And other countries are just going to swoop in and pick up all of the scraps that we left behind. And speaking of other countries, we have to remember that a lot of these 3D printing companies are not based in the United States. They're based overseas, many of them in China. So you can buy printers directly from them, and in some cases, they will ship directly from China. So does that mean that when you purchase a 3D printer from one of these companies and you want it shipped to New York, that you still have to undergo a background check? The state of New York is going to pay for that, and then they're going to communicate with Elegoo or Anycubic or Creality in order to let them know whether or not this American citizen can receive one of their 3D printers. I feel like that type of cooperation probably won't happen, at least not easily. So that's another barrier to making sure that this can actually work. What happens when the seller is not in the state or even the country for that matter? So like I said, good intentions, I think, to try to keep the community safe. And I do think that coming up with some sort of solution in order to crack down on ghost guns, in order to just try to keep people safer and to stop the gun violence from getting so out of control is totally necessary. And there needs to be something done. But this kind of scorched earth approach that really misses a lot of the nuances about how this is done and really just kind of makes anyone who's into this hobby automatically seem like they could be a potential criminal. That is not the way to go. So I totally recommend for the Assemblywoman who came up with this bill, if it doesn't go through and if she wants to retool it and reintroduce it at another time, I really would recommend to sit down with your constituents, the people who are in this community, and ask their opinions and their viewpoints on what you might be thinking about doing, because this is not the way. And I'm pretty sure even though we're kind of biased because we like 3D printing, just as a broad overview of what this could mean and the image that it gives, and just all the different workarounds that anyone can do to make this law kind of useless. I think it's important for her to get that kind of information and try to come up with another way to stop the ghost guns, because making 3D printers something that needs to be regulated and going through background checks in order to purchase, that's not the way. So let me know down in the comments what you think about this proposed bill. And please, let's keep it respectable for the Assemblywoman who proposed this bill. I don't want this turning into a Democrat versus Republican thing. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. She's just another lawmaker that I think is misinformed about this situation. And it's just a bad bill. It happens to a lot of people, but I want to know your opinion about this, and what do you think could be done in order to sort of work on the whole ghost gun problem that doesn't demonize the entire 3D printing industry? So that's it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.